Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today we are talking about the AI acceleration gap. This is a new phenomenon that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and which I think has some pretty significant consequences for both individuals and companies, but which I also think is at risk of being subsumed into broader AI conversations in a way that isn't all that helpful. And I want to talk first about the acceleration side of the acceleration gap. Perhaps the biggest thing that we've been tracking here at AIDB in January is this sense and realization among many of the most enfranchised users of AI that something fairly meaningful has shifted, that some inflection point has been reached recently, which really has changed what we can do. You started to see this around the holidays, with a great example of it being this viral tweet from OpenAI co-founder Andrej Karpathy, who wrote, "I've never felt this much behind as a programmer. The profession is being dramatically refactored as the bits contributed by the programmer are increasingly sparse in between. I have a sense I could be 10x more powerful if I just properly string together what has become available over the last year, and a failure to claim the boost feels decidedly like a skill issue. Clearly some powerful alien tool was handed around, except it comes with no manual, and everyone has to figure out how to hold it and operate it, while the resulting magnitude 9 earthquake is rocking the profession. Roll up your sleeves to not fall behind." And so obviously why this was so resonant is one, that many people were feeling like this, but two, the source of it. This is someone who can claim to be in the very top list of people who have actually built this technology, not just use it, and they are saying they are feeling behind relative to what's possible. However, there was a positive side of this as well. On January 3rd, Midjourney founder David Holes wrote, "I've done more personal coding projects over Christmas break than I have in the last 10 years. It's crazy. I can sense the limitations, but I know nothing is going to be the same anymore." Now, we have talked extensively about the combination of models, Opus 4.5, 5.2 codecs, as well as the harnesses like Claude Code in which they operate. What's more, since the beginning of the month, there has been a continuous set of additional updates. For example, Claude Cowork and most recently Claudebot, which everyone has been talking about, including me on yesterday's episode, that just continue to extend this discourse of acceleration. Over the weekend, New York Times columnist Kevin Roose wrote about the increasing chasm of experience and impression of AI between the most enfranchised users and everyone else. He wrote, "I follow AI adoption pretty closely, and I have never seen such a yawning inside-outside gap. People in San Francisco are putting multi-agent Claude swarms in charge of their lives, consulting chatbots before every decision, wireheading to a degree only sci-fi writers dared to imagine. People elsewhere are still trying to get approval to use Copilot in Teams, if they're using AI at all. It's possible the early adopter bubble I'm in has always been this intense, but there seems to be a cultural takeoff happening in addition to the technical one. Not ideal." Adding a little bit more, Kevin continues, "I want to believe that everyone can learn this stuff. But in the same way that the AI companies that took scaling seriously started stockpiling GPUs, etc. before 2022 had a virtually insurmountable head start over latecomers, it's possible that restrictive IT policies have created a generation of knowledge workers who will never catch up." So Kevin here is talking about a natural outcome of this acceleration experience that we've been discussing, in a way that is, of course, concerned, that sees this understanding gap as a problem. Many people chimed in to say that this also resonated with their experience. AEI fellow John Bailey wrote, "This captures it exactly. In late December, my feed was full of people using Claude Code and declaring AGI. The same week, a DC consulting exec told me AI was mostly hype because of hallucinations. And then at a holiday party, most of my mom's friends still hadn't tried ChatGPT. It felt like living in 3 different realities." Now what's fascinating, and builds on this idea of living in different realities, is that the responses to Kevin's post were basically a Rorschach test for how people feel about AI, almost as a social or political issue, not just as some new technology category. Lots of people were determined to imply that AI was NFTs 2.0. Lincoln Michelle shared an old post from the Rare Candy NFT marketplace that said, "A lot of y'all still don't get it. Ape holders can use multiple slurp juices on a single ape. So if you have 1 Astro ape and 3 slurp juices, you can create 3 new apes. Tonight's Slurp Juice Mint event is essentially a minting event for both lab monkeys and special forces." Point being, of course, that this sounds absurd, and all this hype around AI will sound just as absurd a few years from now. Vinit Trivedi did what many people did, which is throw old Kevin Roose posts and articles in his face, like this one from 2021 where he wrote about pudgy penguins in a piece titled, "I joined a penguin NFT club because apparently that's what we do now." Some were even angrier. John Rapetti paraphrased Kevin's post as this: "All the evil morons who can't do anything are using AI for everything. Normal people aren't. How can we explain this?" Dr. Andrew Neighbor summed up the people who insist that all of this is ineffective bluster. He writes, "New tech does not exist outside of culture. This sounds the same as any other hustle culture optimizing life hack grift. These fussy little bits of AI software give dopamine hits with marginal or negative impact on productivity, lifestyle, or mental health. Now, it should be noted that it is not just the AI haters who have critiques to be levied, even if they are not being pointed so personally at Kevin himself. Notebook LM co-creator Reza Martin wrote, "As a topic of conversation among most people, I feel like AI is also reaching peak saturation. Imagine going on and on about your multi-agent setup when literally most people are still using AI as a glorified Google search. Really outside the San Francisco X bubble, AI continues to be off-putting to most people and is starting to sound like the product of a fanatical fever dream from a productivity-obsessed microculture. I think this is probably the byproduct of the speed of progress being largely driven by the models themselves and not the product surfaces. It's a fun time for early adopters, but really grating to anyone else." In other words, Reza is saying, in addition to us AI people being kind of annoying with how we talk about all this, the products themselves aren't all that great to use, especially when compared to the capabilities. Others pointed out that identifying this as a San Francisco thing is probably incorrect. Professor Ethan Malik wrote, "This isn't just a San Francisco thing. There are people in a range of professions who found absolutely breathtaking uses of current capabilities, like using agent swarms to do real work in crazy ways, but they are often more isolated because of a lack of unifying community." Kevin Warbach said this is real and notable. Framing it as SF versus the world is misleading. The real question is whether companies, which tend to be risk-averse, will lose out as startups and individuals capitalize on the new capabilities of agentic AI. MIT Sloan's Matt Bean wrote, "The gap is huge, consequential, and growing. Many of the consequences are wonderful, but generally this gap is unnecessary, driven by privilege, and, if prior science is any guide, will blunt the gains from the tech and concentrate power even further." Summing it all up, Dean Ball wrote, "The gap between the early adopters and everyone else, both in terms of their AI use but also in their ways of thinking, has never been wider and appears to be widening at an accelerating rate. Even most of my followers clearly don't get it. Slightly worrisome." So I think what all these folks are identifying is actually a real thing. And for the sake of having a simple, memorable name, I'm calling it the acceleration gap or the AI acceleration gap. I recently shared this slide in a corporate presentation. And basically, I argued that for much of the last few years of AI, while there were certainly some groups that had a real capability advantage versus everyone else, the gap between the early adopters and the other types of users was fairly consistent. In other words, there was some correlation in the rate of progress between all the different categories of users. Recently, however, it feels to me that we've seen a major uptick in what is capable at the frontier. And that, in the context of enterprises, that meant that we were going to see an increasingly wide divergence between whatever the median of enterprise AI usage was and the frontier of the most successful users of AI. The challenge, of course, is that as that frontier accelerates, the gap between the frontier and everyone else compounds. The AI capabilities themselves beget more and more advanced use cases, which allow the deployers of those use cases to have more advantage relative to their peers who are not deploying those particular use cases and capabilities. And so now I'm exploring the idea of this acceleration gap, but not just as a company phenomenon, but as an individual phenomenon as well. The risk of this is that linear growth in an exponential environment is ultimately a compounding disadvantage, and could, if we are being doomy about it, lead, as Kevin suggests, to the creation of a generation of knowledge workers who will never fully catch up. Now, I don't want to definitively say that this is the point that we're at. I'm presenting the acceleration gap more right now as something that I'm exploring than that I feel that I have my head fully wrapped around. There are plenty of smart people, even who aren't anti-AI zealots, that shared plenty of reasons on Kevin Roos's post that things won't play out this way. Bloomberg's Joe Weisenthal, the host of Odd Lots, and someone who has been going very deep with Claude recently, responded, "I doubt late adopters will be impaired very much. For most AI tools, the learning curves aren't very steep, and the interfaces keep getting more intuitive." This is basically the Claude Cowork argument. If it's in Anthropic's incentive to launch Claude Cowork to make Claude Code type capabilities available for everyone without having to figure out how to use the terminal, maybe there's a sense in just waiting for those capabilities to come online in a user interface that is, for most people, actually usable. But why I wanted to talk about it is, one, I do think that this compounding gap is a real possibility with some fairly serious implications for an individual's career. And two, I think that the discourse surrounding AI gets more and more fraught and fractious every day in ways that I worry will very much not serve the vast majority of people who are just trying to figure this stuff out. Ever since the beginning of this show, I've had the feeling, and I've shared my feeling, that while the loudest voices are those on the extremes, the people who are incredibly excited about everything that AI has to offer, almost determined to love it no matter what, even in some cases who refuse to see any of the bad sides, and then on the other end of the spectrum, the absolutely determined detractors, the people who are determined to hate it no matter what, whether it's because of some doomsday scenario that they see in the future, or for much less sci-fi reasons, like they just think it's another tech billionaire plaything, and this has now become part of a larger class and political discourse. The point is that those extreme voices represent a very small majority of the whole, despite how much of the conversation share they seem to own. The vast majority lives somewhere in the middle, experimenting and uncertain, finding things it's useful for and things it's overhyped for, able to see positive outcomes of how this technology could be used, but also understand legitimate concerns about what it's going to mean for jobs, for communities, for the world at large. I could be wrong, but it feels like the attitudes of the determined detractors are getting harder and more calcified recently. I don't know if this is because it's getting caught up in a larger, very fraught political discourse, which is in and of itself getting louder, or what, but I do believe that the risks as an individual of erring too far on that side versus erring too far on the side of the excited zealots has more potential dire consequences. Basically, if you spend a bunch of time trying to learn all these things that end up being nothing burgers because the determined detractors were right, the cost to you is just whatever time you spent learning the new set of tools. If, on the other hand, you err on the side of the determined detractors and you use their arguments that all of this is NFTs 2.0 to not take the time to learn these things, the risk, if you and they are wrong, is that you are fundamentally unprepared for the skills of a new work future. To me, the cost-benefit analysis clearly favors spending at least some time experimenting with and trying to harness the new capabilities. But it would be very easy to get completely lost in the sauce. The AI community on X, for example, does get incredibly excited about things that in many cases won't amount to much. Olivia Moore from A16Z captured a bit of this when she wrote a piece this weekend, "Claudebot is amazing, and I don't think consumers should use it." She writes, "I spent the weekend setting up Claudebot," which, editor's note, is being renamed Multi because of trademark concerns from Anthropic, which works for me because it's a lot easier to say Multi than Claudebot when you guys are just listening to me rather than watching. In any case, Olivia continues, "By Sunday evening, I had an AI agent that summarizes my Twitter feed, one that recommends new books weekly based on my recent reads, and a third that texts me every morning with my schedule, a weather alert, and a fun quote. It's genuinely magical, and I don't think most people should try it yet." Now, she then goes into what makes Claudebot special and why it's really interesting, but what the problems are as well. The problems for her include the fact that the setup is really technical, that there are pretty big security implications of giving an AI agent access to all those accounts, and the risk of triggering things you don't want to have happen. She also points out a question, which is present even if unstated in many of the critiques: what's the killer use case? Now, even in my recent episode about Claudebot, I drew the personal line between what I found interesting and what I didn't find so interesting. For me, the not so interesting was all the tinkerer personal assistant use cases, versus what I thought was really exciting and powerful, which is the way that people like Nat Eliason were setting this up effectively as a staff engineer for their companies and getting real work done while they slept. Ultimately, the point that Olivia was making is that even if Claudebot is super cool, everyone doesn't have to run out and try it right now. And so that brings up the question, how should we respond to this acceleration gap to the extent that it exists? I think what people don't need to do, at least en masse, is to obsess over every change in development. Hopefully that's what resources like this show can help with as we survey the landscape of everything and try to synthesize and curate which things bubble to the top as actually really relevant versus things that are much more firmly in the category of the experimental and exploratory. So in addition to not obsessing over every change in development, I don't think that everyone has to try every new tool or platform. Early adopters have a very critical role in the lifecycle of any new technology by being the front lines who bang on all the software and figure out what's going to actually work. Early adopters inevitably find more use cases that end up being mainstream, but we have to remember that just because the early adopters are talking about all the things that they're doing doesn't mean that those things are ready for mainstream use yet. Lastly, despite all of the tweets to the contrary over the past weekend, you do not need to buy Mac Minis and set up Lobster-themed AI assistants to make sure you are not on the wrong side of the AI acceleration gap. What then is valuable? I do think that while most people don't need to follow like sports every new change in development, it is valuable in general to understand what the experimenters are trying, to have some sort of coherent idea of which things are getting the frontline early adopters excited at any given moment. Even more importantly, I really encourage people to create some sort of personal experimental practice, basically some structured or unstructured time or cadence or routine where you take the time to kick the tires on these new tools and see what can actually be helpful for you. One of the greatest challenges right now for business users of AI is that in general, companies, even if they expect their people to be taking advantage of these tools, are not giving them time within their normal schedules to learn these tools. They're basically expecting people to do it on their own. That's not fair, but it is the state of things. And I think one of the most differentiated things that anyone can do, and one of the best ways to be on the right side of the acceleration gap, is to just determine for yourself some practice where you don't wait for someone to give you permission, you just go figure out which of these tools and platforms can be valuable for you and whatever you're trying to get for them. And lastly, as a piece of that, I do think that it's extremely valuable to push at least slightly outside your comfort zone. Right now, to me, the most obvious example of this for many non-coders is to start to get familiar with experimenting with trying to solve your non-code problems with software. This does not mean, by the way, that you need to start by using Claude Code in the terminal. Tools like Replit and Lovable are vastly more intuitive, even if that comes with certain types of trade-offs. But the point is, wherever your comfort zone is, the capabilities of AI almost certainly extend outside it. So if you can push yourself outside it as well, you are likely to find some use cases that you might not otherwise. My hope for everyone listening here is that to the extent that there is an acceleration gap, I want everyone to be on the best side of it. And I want to make sure we do that without unduly hyping things that are not ready for prime time, or that are only marginally useful, or that generally just remain in the fun tinkering category for the people who want to tinker. In addition to trying to capture where the state of the conversation is, I will also try to continue to give you resources for keeping up. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching, as always. And until next time, peace.